Hi guys, welcome to City Mentors. My name is Ketan and today I'm going to talk about IIFT GK. I'm going to tell you a couple of important topics which are going to be short in IIFT. Again, when I talk about these topics, right? See, when you talk about clearing the cutoff as far as IIFT GK is concerned, now, honestly, clearing the cutoff is not a big deal. You will be able to clear the cutoff. But for the fact, all these important topics that I'm going to teach you today, these topics will help you, rather it will give you a great opportunity to increase your score. So, where other people are looking at just clearing cutoff, by doing all these important topics you will be actually able to score very well in IIFT GK, which will be, again, like at the end of the day, that would matter, because if you're scoring very well in GK, your overall score will shoot up. Now I'm going to give you a little bit idea that I'm going to do this video in three categories. Now those three categories are, so this current video is basically, I'm going to talk about the important topics. So that's number one. So here I'm going to give you the bird's eye view. Here I'm going to give you the overall idea, which all the important topics and all that stuff. Now the second video that I'm going to publish will be talking about how do you actually, by just using a bit of logical understanding and just by using a bit of shortcuts, you can actually knock off questions in the IIFT even after not knowing the exact answer. Yes, even if you do not know the answer, by just understanding couple of logical stuff, couple of steps you need to follow, and you will be able to mark the correct answer. So that's going to be number two. Number three is going to be whatever important topics that I'm going to give you today. I will be making a detailed videos on it eventually and will be uploaded on my channel. So if you are new to my channel, if you haven't subscribed to it, then do subscribe to it, because this will solve all your GK related queries and questions. So guys, let's move ahead and try to understand what are the important topics we have for IIFT GK. All right. The most important category for IIFT GK is international organization. Now, let me tell you why this category is the most important category. See, when you understand IIFT as a college, right? IIFT is quite quite concerned about the trade and the finance, right? So I'm going to talk about the trade part, and that's the reason all the international organizations that we have, they are indeed important as far as IIFT is concerned. Now let's understand what are the organizations that we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk about organizations which are the apex one, and then we're going to talk about the G organizations. I'll come back to this later. Now let's begin with India first of all. So we've got RBI, which is going to be on the top level. So we've got RBI, then we've got SEBI. Right, on a world level, you've got World Trade Organization, you've got NATO, then you got OPEC. Right, nowadays you know that the oil fights are going on, so OPEC is really important. Then you have World Health Organization, then you have SARC, then you have any other organization which is really important. Then you can talk about IMF, which is International Monetary Fund. Then you have something called as ADB, which is Asian Development Bank. Then you can have, let's say, ACB, which is European Central Bank. So all these organizations, likewise organization, as I said, right, I will be making a different video altogether wherein we will be covering all the organizations. Now this part of IIFT GK is called as static one. What do you mean by static one? Static one means something which has been there since ages, right? So here what you have to do is you will have to take into consideration about learning about all these organizations. Now again, you don't have to learn everything. I'm going to write down a couple of points for you which are going to be the most important. So this is nothing but a quick introduction or a kind of an example for all of you, which will help you. So you can again put in here as Niti Aayog also can be one of the most important organization for that. They might ask you about. So I'll talk to you about this. So let's start with the basic questions that you can get in IIFT, and which is going to be short questions. So number one is going to be the year of establishment, like when it was established, which year it was established. Number two, a lot of people forget this, but this is again an imperative, which is knowing the purpose of the organization, that why this organization came into picture. Now I will add one more organization out here, which is nothing but this is the quite famous one, which is called as World Bank, right? So I'll just put in the addition of World Bank in here. Now, a lot of people get confused that what is the exact role of World Bank, and the confusion is actually between the IMF and World Bank, and that's so. A lot of people feel that IMF and World Bank, they do have a similar functionality, but I think that's not correct. So, if you just have to understand or bifurcate the purpose of IMF and World Bank is, so if you look at on a bird's eye view, IMF is basically do the job of bailing out. So all the bailouts that are happening in the world, when you talk about the AIG, Lehman Brothers, when you talk about PIGS, which is Portugal, Italy, Greece, and all that stuff, all the major financial, again I can put it this way, all the major financial slash economical matters which are global, IMF will look into it. So that's the predominant role of IMF, that they are actually helping the countries, the companies to bail out, so that they actually, once you bail out somebody or a country, there is a economical stability, and that's what the IMF is doing. IMF has bailed out, they have paid huge amount of money to Greece also. Now, coming back to World Bank, what does World Bank do? See, World Bank works in the benefit of the world. Okay, now understand this, both the guys are working for the benefit of the globe, right? But World Bank is basically, what it does is it finances the projects. Okay, it finances the projects which in return boost the economic growth of a country. Now that's the most important thing. You're getting my point, right? So the World Bank gives you the funds, all the funds which are required for a country, for a company to actually get into the project. Now, it can be any kind of a project. It can be a solar project, it can be a space project, it can be an infrastructure project, it can be an educational project. Any goddamn project can be there, where the World Bank can actually fund you. So because of which you are able to get the things done. And that's where it will be actually helping you to add to the economic growth of a country. Now, as and when the economic growth happens, and there will be fundraising and all that will happen, right? At the end of the tunnel, when you say that if anything goes wrong and if the organization is on the verge of, let's say, bankruptcy, then your IMF will come into picture, and that's where IMF will be funding you, right? Now, in the same fashion, people get confused about RBI and SEBI. Also, the purpose is a little different. World Trade Organization is also having a different purpose, right? So that's the most important thing. Again, SARC and Asian Development Bank, right? So SARC has mostly Asian countries itself, and then ADB acts a little different. So yes, so the important point here is that you need to understand the purpose. That's number two. Then number three, when we talk about, so number three is going to be the important one, because this is what the IFT would be much keen on asking you guys. So number three is going to be the head. Okay, who leads it? Now, who's the head of, let's say, IMF? Who's the head of RBI? So on and so forth, right? That's number three. Number four is going to be the headquarters, right? So where are the headquarters located at? I think the ADB is one of the most difficult ones to answer, and a lot of people feel that this is in India or somewhere and all that stuff. So ADB is basically located. The headquarters is in Manila. That's Philippines. So that's where the ADB is. Right, so that's where you need to understand that yes, the establishment date, the purpose, the head office, the headquarter, the head of the organization. Number five I can talk about is let's say summit. Now, when you talk about summit, so what happens is, if these guys at all have any kind of an event, the annual summit, it happens in Geneva, it happens maybe in India, sometimes in London or Paris, whatever, you got to know that. So this is one part of your organization. So quickly to go through, it's the establishment year, purpose, the head of the organization, headquarter, summit, whenever it has happened, right? And again, we talked about the personality also. Now, when you talk about G organization, now how it's different. So whenever we talk about G organization, it's a little different, because G organizations work in a different way. So you have G20, you've got G7, so on and so forth. Recently, we know that it was G20 which was there in the news. So we had a lot of news about G20. So you got to know where the summit happened. Okay, where the summit happened, who all are. So I can put in as a participants, who all are the participants of G20, or who all are not the participants. So you might be having a option wherein they might ask you that, given below, which is the country is not a part of G20, or which is the country is not a part of SARC or ADB whatsoever. So participants and non-participants, where the summit happened, that's the reason, that's quite important. And again, you can have the purpose, like why G20 was established and when it was established. So you can have the year of establishment also. So this is about your international organization. If you take care of this, you can guaranteed have a one question in the IIFT. So that's about the international organization. Now let's move ahead and do the another important categories. All right, the other one is the sports one. Again, this is the most important one. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the bifurcation about the international one and let's say the domestic one. Now again, you don't have to do a lot of stuff as far as sports are concerned. This is not going to be static. This is purely going to be the current affairs, right? So what you have to do is you need to understand that all the events, all the major World Cups, all the major opens like Australian Open, French Open, Wimbledon, let's say T20, let's say Olympics, whatsoever has happened in last 2 years, it's very much important for all of you to understand it, right? Now when you talk about sports, right, what you guys need to understand, you need to understand the place where it happened. Like if it's an Olympic, where it happened. You also need to understand the host, who hosted the Olympic, right? Or let's say Indian, the Cricket World Cup or Football World Cup, or let's say any kind of a sport which has had the World Cup in a recent times. That's number 2. Number 3, definitely who was the winner. Okay, who was the winner? And number 4, who lost it. Okay, who lost it, right? Number 4, any kind of a special event. Let's say it was 20th World Cup for any kind of sports, or you can also try to understand the debut, right? Anybody who actually it was the first time, it was a debut or it was a debutant, right? You need to understand about the players. So sports will also include a bit information about the players also. So this is where the category comes into the world record. So when you talk about the Wimbledon, or when you talk about tennis, or when you talk about the badminton, when you talk about the Olympic, whatsoever, right? Anything that popped up into the news in last 2 years, you got to know them, because you can expect round about 1 to 2 questions based on sports for sure. And the sports category is it's a bit broader. Why? Because it talks about the sport, that's number 1, and it also talks about the person. So you got to remember both the things actually, right? And again, world record and everything, you must know them. So anything to do with the sports, you must have the idea about it. All right. Personalities, the another most important category as far as your IIFT is concerned. You will be getting short questions from here. Now let's talk about personalities. So this is a broad category, to be very honest, but when I talk about personalities, it's predominantly on the business front. Okay, so I'm going to give you an idea as to how you need to move ahead. So what you have to understand is, when you talk about the business, right, you need to understand, okay, number 1, which all companies we had in the news, this time. So currently you have PMC in the news, because it's actually completely screwed, right? So you've got PMC in news, you've got an RBI in news, you've got Facebook in news, you've got a lot of social media companies in the news. So you've got to remember all these CEOs, all these COOs. So when you talk about Facebook, right, a lot of people know the CEO of Facebook, but people don't know the COO of Facebook, right? When you talk about the Yahoo, right, a lot of people don't know the CEO of Yahoo, but they know CEO of Google, right? That's the problem. When you talk about Twitter, right, a lot of people might not be knowing who's the CEO or COO of Twitter, because when you talk about a company which is the social media company, the operations would matter a lot. Something to do with, let's say you have YouTube, right? Now who's the head of YouTube? Or TikTok, that's the amazing example, right? Because TikTok was banned earlier in India, now it is back again. So yes, you need to understand that also. Now, who is the Instagram co-founder? Most of you are not even aware of it, right? We only know Instagram, but we don't know who's the co-founder of it, right? So we got to know about it, right? All these social media companies, you got to know about the CEOs and all that. Then when you talk about the businesses, right? Business is any company which went into the the train, or like which got, let's say, merged with any other company, or if there was any kind of an acquisition, or any company became a bankrupt, right, or any company had a new IPO, you have to know about it, right? Now when you talk about a personality, guys, do you remember something about CCD? Right? Yeah. Now I'm talking about the founder, right? The founder, right? That's a side case is quite, was there in the news. So yeah, you need to understand that, founder. Now when you talk about this founder, right, there might be a question: who were the investors in your CCD, right? So again, we can talk about that also. Then you can talk about, there are a lot of companies. So the only thing that you need to understand is all the personalities who made it to the news in last 1 to 1.5 years with respect to the business. And trust me, there are not many people. So it doesn't become a lot of tasks to do. So yeah, so this is what you need to understand as far as your personalities are concerned. So this is going to be on both the level, international one and the Indian one also, right? Even if you just Google it up, right? Even just Google it, right? Personalities in the news in last 1 year, you'll be able to get a lot of stuff. So that's about the personalities. Now companies, the another important the category. Now again, here we also going to have bifurcation. Again, we're going to talk about the international companies and the Indian companies, but to be very honest, this category will be quite more on the international front. Now let's talk about the companies. See, the fundamental rule remain the same. Any company which made it to the news in last 1.5 year. Now, let's talk about Alibaba. Okay. Now, why Alibaba was in the news? Because Jack Ma, who's the founder of Alibaba, he recently resigned. Okay. So this can be a question from the personality perspective, or this can be a question from the company's perspective. So you've got Alibaba. Then we know Elon Musk, right? So when you talk about Mr. Musk, right, what you need to understand, how many companies he's holding now. Okay. So we all know about this Tesla, we know all about the SpaceX and all that, but there are other companies also which is predominantly working on the artificial intelligence. So this is the company which is led by Elon Musk, which is into the artificial intelligence. Now people know that Elon Musk has a company into the artificial intelligence, but people don't know that, which is that company, what is the name of that company, right? Now that's the problem. So you got to know all about those companies, right? Then again, as I said, social media, any new player which is making into social media, because this is the main, this is kind of a hot cake, right? This is the hot cake, right? So you need to understand any new company which is made it to social media like TikTok and all that stuff. Another company, it's a very common thing, right? Mergers and acquisition, who acquired who, right? So that is again there. So acquisition again can be part of. Then you can talk about joint venture. Are there two companies, they came together and started a new company altogether on an international level or on Indian level. So these are the things that you need to understand. Any company there in the market which has been coming up in the news again and again, let's say maybe for a kind of a solar purpose, or let's say kind of anything, right, which has made news, you got to remember those companies. That's going to be very important. So the only thing that you have to understand is name of the company. Okay, so you need to understand the name of the company. So it's not much name of the company, who's the head of the company, and what is the business of that company. As simple as that. Do not expect these guys to ask you about what's the establishment date, or incorporation date and all that. Not at all. It's a very narrow category. You will be able to manage it. That's not a problem. So companies is going to be the another important topic for IFT. Stock exchanges. One question short. Now there are so many stock exchanges in the world. So as I told you, right, I will be making separate videos wherein there will be one video separately talking about stock exchanges. So we will be doing that on an important level, right? I want you guys to cover a couple of countries and their stock exchanges. So you've got India. So you've got India predominantly. Excuse me. Then you have USA for sure. Then you have Japan. You've got China. Okay. Then you have Europe. So I want you guys to at least cover these countries and try and understand which all the most important stock exchanges in this country. So stock exchanges is going to be very narrow topic, but yeah, one question short. Okay, business and economics, the broad category. Now, understand this why business and economics is very much important because, as I said, IIFT predominantly focuses on trade and the business. So, anything that's happening in business and economics, we must know about it. So, this category is very broad, but again, it's kind of it will involve a lot of categories like personalities and companies and international organizations and all that, right? So, business and economics, all the news that are there, from last 1.5 year, you must be knowing all the news about business and economics. So when you talk about economics, right, you can talk about, let's say, bank rate. Okay, you can talk about the Nobel Prize winner, right? Again, it can form a part of personality or it can form a part of economics also, right? So you got to understand the bank rate. You need to understand the a bit of monetary policy. There might be questions based on bank rate, there might be questions based on monetary policy, there might be questions based on GDP, there might be questions based on let's say inflation rate, that was the inflation as of now. There might be a question on top countries in the world according to the GDP value, something like that. As far as the businesses are concerned, see, business is a broad category. It can have mergers and acquisition, IPOs, joint ventures, startups is something I am expecting these guys to ask. So what's going to be, so they will not be asking you of any kind of an amount that how much funding was raised by, let's say, XYZ startup. But if you look at on an international level, something called as SoftBank, right, or funding given to, let's say, Byju's, right, all these things you got to remember. Whatever is happening in the business on a very, very large scale, you got to remember that. Something to do with Jio has been in the news from last couple of months about their Jio fiber and all that stuff. Let's say you talk about Airtel, the new plan that Airtel launched with, right, something to do with the digitalization, right? That is something you need to understand. Any other company which is in the mobile field doing anything really great or awesome, something to do with that. Anything which is in the space domain, space is now happening a lot actually, right? So any kind of a thing or any tie-up that has happened between India and any other country for not space exactly, but let's say on a defense category. So I can give you a great example, something to do with the Rafale, right? So we know that we've got this contract with France and Rafale and all that. So they might ask you who's the defense ministry of France, right? Again, this question can get into the personality also, or it can be under the business category. Now we also know that there have been talks about the Sukhoi, right? Because India is now taking the contract for that. So this is anything that is happening with a country. Now when you talk about economics, this is predominantly going to be on an India level. So you need to understand what's happening in the business on the economics, important category as far as your IIFT is concerned. All right, indexes. Again, the another important category when you talk about indexes. See, it's a very straightforward one. You got happiness index. You've got ease to do business index, right? You got, let's say, GDP indexes. You got, let's say, poverty and all that. So all the important indexes in the world you should be knowing. Now again, the challenge is that there are a lot of indexes that you got to remember, right? Then which are the important ones? Again, I will be making a separate video about the indexes. So if you're not subscribed, do subscribe to the channel so that you get the information first handed, and you just have to do those many indexes and you're sorted for it. Government yojanas and bills, this is the most important because if you look at in the last 2 years in India, this has been talked a lot about, right? So government yojana, like you've got Ayushman Bharat, you've got Make in India, you've got Jan Dhan, right? There are so many yojanas, and there are so many bills that has been presented in the parliament. Some bills have been passed, some bills are on the hold. So guys, this is going to be the most important category. But yes, the only thing that you have to do is try to understand 1.5 year previously, or let's say 2 years, right? All the important bills and the yojanas that government came up with in last 1 to 2 years. Keep it 2 years on a safer hand because they might ask you for 2 years also. So this is going to be the another important category for your IIFT. Last but not the least, something that is called as finance. Now again, as I told you, IIFT is predominantly concerned about the trade, and when you talk about the trade, you have finance in there also. So again, as far as the finance is concerned, again, it's a broad category. If you can do it, then do it. If not, then just leave it. Something to do with the concepts. Okay, so they might ask you in economics category, they might ask you about the inflation, right, which is the what is the current inflation, and how is the inflation calculated? Is it calculated on WPI or CPI? In the concept, in the finance category, right? They might ask you which one of the below is the definition of inflation. Then you might have something called as stagflation, right? Something to do with this, right? You might have a question based on GDP. You might have a question, based on bank rate. You might have a question based on the repo ones, right? You might have the questions based on Sensex, that what is the Sensex? Again, all that stuff. So anything to do with the finance, you guys must be aware of it. But yes, if you're doing a bit of economics very well, then I think you should be sorted with it. Now again, finance, when we talk about keep in mind that companies which are dealing in financial domain, you guys got to know about them. Currently we have PMC, okay? Then we've been talking about the merger, or I will say not merger, I will say something to do with the consolidation of Indian banks, right? This has been the hot news in the market. So you got to remember all these banks, which all banks are going to get consolidated. We have this trio wherein Bank of Baroda, Vijaya Bank and Dena Bank, they got consolidated now, right? So this is the finance domain that I'm talking about, because IIFT is going to be pretty much keen on asking you questions from this category. So guys, these are the categories that we have, and if you do these categories, as I said, you can be really guaranteed to get a good score. See, understand this. Your overall score to beat the cutoff or to clear the cutoff, you should be scoring around about 1 to 1.5 marks. Let's say in a worst scenario, 2 marks. To get those 2 marks, you just have to answer 5 to 6 questions, right? Even if you do these categories, you are thoroughly getting away from your cutoff. I mean, you will be able to crack cutoff, that is for sure. So just do these things and you'll be sorted. Now, I will be uploading more videos. I'll be uploading videos on shortcuts and all these individual categories. If you follow them judiciously, you will be able to score even more in this category, because a lot of people do not score much in the GK. This has been kind of the neglected area, but now when you talk about IIFT, the GK has been on a lighter note. So it's a great opportunity for all of you to score very well. So guys, stay tuned to my channel. If you have not subscribed to my channel, then do subscribe to my channel for all the GK related and other exam related content at my channel. So guys, thank you so much for your time. If you have any question, if you're confused, if you want to get more clarity, put the comment on the video and I will get in touch with you. Thank you so much.